The most outdated idea is to go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest in the stock market for the long term. See, why save money when they're printing trillions of dollars? The gap between the 1% and the 99% is huge. It's not just about money. You have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So what are you doing? There is a poor person in each of us. There is still a poor person in me. There is also a middle-class person, and the middle-class person wants security. He wants that steady salary.
And there is a rich person. They are all within us, except it is not taught. You are taught to go to school, get a job, and get a salary. You don't learn how to get rich. If you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, my rich dad refused to pay me. He said salary is one of the most damaging things you can accept in your life. He says the moment you take a salary, you are an employee, and that is the mindset. So my rich dad never paid me. This drove my poor father, a government employee, crazy. You gotta pay people, you gotta pay people. And Rich Dad didn't say the salary was bad. He said he didn't want to be a slave to money.
So, as an entrepreneur, when Rich Dad went bankrupt, I just tried another business. I don't need a salary. I don't need anyone to take care of me. If my government doesn't like me, I'll move to another country because they need entrepreneurs there. So the entrepreneur is not so much the business. The entrepreneur is really the mindset and the skills and a set of other rules. You see, I don't run a small business by the same rules as a large company. An entrepreneur is a mindset first, then skills and rules. And depending on whether you're an employee or a small business owner, the rules are different, the mindsets are different, the skills are different.
If you could say something to a person who has never been an entrepreneur and is thinking about taking the plunge into self-employment, what would you tell them? Well, I would just tell them the same thing that happened to me. My last salary, I remember it well. It was one of the worst and best days of my life. I was in Puerto Rico. I was working for Xerox, and my boss gave me my last. It wasn't a salary, it was a bonus check. I think it was about $30,000, but taxable. That was the only problem with it. So I get this check, and I'm like, holy crap. I was excited, but I was also worried.
And then this other guy comes to me. His name was John, and John says to me, he says, "You'll be back." I said, "Why?" He says, "Because you will fail." I looked at him and said, "Look, a few naughty words." Because that's what he did. He left Xerox, failed, and came back. I said, "Look, you failed and came back, but I'm going to fail and never come back." And that's the attitude. Do you understand? Yes. If you say, "Well, if I fail, I'm going back to mom and dad," that's what you're going to do. So when you fail, that's when I became an entrepreneur, because I had no money. I didn't have any money for years. Yes, I had no salary. But that's what my rich dad encouraged me to do. He says if you don't have that salary, you become hungrier, smarter, and it's a test of your character.
Are you going to become a crook? Will you become dishonest? Will you cheat and steal, or will you become a better person? So that's really the benefit of becoming an entrepreneur. You really find out who you are when you have nothing.
You always have to look at the big picture. Too many people only think about what will happen to me. If you look at the big picture, you will also know that if something bad happens, something good will happen too. But you have to prepare for whatever comes. If you think the next 20 years will be like the last 20 years, you're lost.
When you and I go to the grocery store and buy a carton of milk, we always check the expiration date. But most people don't check the expiration date on their brains. Instead of getting out of debt, I'm going into debt. I just refinanced $300 million in debt and went from 5% to 2.5% interest. I made a fortune. More money comes in every month because my financing costs have gone down.
While some financial experts say get out of debt, I say learn how to use debt. You see, when I got back from Vietnam service in January 1973, my rich dad said to me, "Go to school to learn how to invest in real estate." It wasn't about real estate, it was about how to use debt and taxes. Debt and taxes make the rich richer. Debt and taxes make the poor and middle class poorer. So all the rich people who are doctors and lawyers, or, these people, they're being wiped out and they don't know why. Doctors are being wiped out? Oh yes, they make more money, but the net is less. My doctor just yelled at me. He's happy. He says, "Oh, guess what? I finally made $1 million. And I said, "Yes, that was 3 weeks ago."
So I said, "Yeah, how much taxes do you pay?" He says $750,000 in taxes. That left him with about $400,000. That's not bad, but if I make $1 million, I keep $1 million. And the reason is because I don't earn it by working for money. See, if you work for money, you get taxed. That's why lesson number 1 in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the rich don't work for money. What we do instead is start businesses as entrepreneurs. We acquire real estate. I don't invest in the stock market. The reason is because as an entrepreneur, I have more control over my income, how much I earn, and how much I pay in taxes. And because I am an entrepreneur and real estate investor, I pay 0 taxes. For example, every time I make $1 million as an entrepreneur, I immediately invest it in real estate, and I have a 4-to-1 advantage.
I put $1 million into real estate and I get $4 million from the bank.
This is why I love banks. But the banks ruin everyone else, terribly. But it's good for me. I thought you said that if they print, it's good for you. But if they print, it's bad for people who work for money. Because when they print, savers are wiped out. And people who work for money are wiped out. When they print debt, debtors get rich. You see, debt and taxes make the rich richer, and debt and taxes make the poor and middle class poorer. When we have outdated ideas, we get outdated results. So what happens for most people? The idea of going to school, getting a job, working hard, saving money, getting out of debt, buying your house because it's an asset, and investing for the long term. It's outdated.
The world has changed. The world changed in 1971 when President Nixon took us off the gold standard and money became debt.
What if we abolished school? What would happen? Would it be better if we had no education system at all? No, I'm saying education used to be more important. It's just outdated. There's Moore's Law, which says that information doubles every 18 months.
In other words, everything is overhauled every 18 months. And this is a recent phenomenon. So when you get out of school, you're already past. And that's why I'm the old guy. I meet my friends. I went to Harvard. Yes, I went to Harvard. I said, yeah, that was how long ago? 50 years ago? Nowadays, banks charge you interest to save money. In other words, the banks don't want your money because they've printed too much of it. And that's why there are bubbles in the stock market and bubbles in the real estate market and all that. People dump the cash because, as I said here, savers are losers and cash is trash. And yet people say, well, I want to have a well-paying job. Well, that's an outdated idea.
Getting rid of debt is an outdated idea. You should learn how to get into debt, how to use debt to get rich, and they will never teach you about taxes.
The reason the 1% are up here and the 99% are heading this way is because 2 things happen when money is printed: inflation and taxes. It crushes her. And any entrepreneur who thinks, I'm just going to make money and start a business and make a lot of money, because that's what we're talking about. They really need to face reality. That's not what real entrepreneurs do. Most entrepreneurs, there are 28 million small business owners in America. 24 million are one-person entrepreneurs.
They are referred to as non-employee entrepreneurs. And that happens because people don't really understand what an entrepreneur does. Most people are self-employed, but they are not actually entrepreneurs. The self-employed pay the highest taxes of all, and no one tells them that. Yes, it's also called the entrepreneurial spirit, but what we're really talking about is that there is no such thing as a bad economy. Externally, we all have an external economy, but we also have an internal economy, and the will is to change our internal economy. So for me, I can see the good, I can see the bad, I don't really care, because I'll be rich either way.
But a poor person with a poor personal economy will only see a poor economy because they don't know how to make money in any economy. And a middle-class person, they have a middle-class economy. What they want is a nice house, a steady salary, the job and the car. And if you take their job away, it will be a disaster for them. Well, since an entrepreneur doesn't have a job anyway, that's not a big problem. So everything I tell people is what Bucky Fuller taught me. There are always 2 sides. You know what I mean? Use at least 2. If you think the economy is bad, it's because your economy is bad.
If you think stable employment is important, then you will see an economy without jobs, your economy versus the external economy, where you have control versus where you don't have control. I can control. Yeah, it's called an internal focus versus an external focus. So the real entrepreneur has an internal focus. But when he falls, he says, "Oh, that's good because I'm going to rise higher." The average person will fall and say, "Oh, I'll take some Prozac." Or someone makes mistakes. All mistakes don't matter. Well, mistakes count. It means you didn't know something. But a real entrepreneur, whether he falls or rises, can always get back up and go higher.
That no matter what happens to them, they will become stronger, better, smarter, and happier. But a person with a weak inner mindset is so afraid of what might happen that it usually happens. You know, people who are afraid of losing their job often actually lose it. You know what I mean? Yes, without a doubt. So everything goes through you. Yes, the entrepreneur's first task is to control in here, not out there. The moment you accept that paycheck, you are an employee. You have to be stronger than that. It's about control from within.